Here's what we're talking about today, and I want to be very clear from the start. This conversation is for men who find themselves trying to hold on to a woman who has emotionally checked out. Men who feel her pulling away, growing colder, or saying she's no longer interested, and who don't understand why everything they've been taught to do only seems to push her further. I'm not here as a motivational speaker. I'm not here to sell hope or fantasy. I'm speaking from the perspective of someone who has spent years sitting across from men in quiet rooms, men who are confused, ashamed, still hopeful, and deeply hurting in ways they rarely admit out loud. RBA, welcome back to the channel. Now, here's the part that might challenge everything you believe, so I want you to sit with it. You do not get a woman back by chasing her. You don't get her back by convincing her, and you don't get her back by proving anything. In fact, the harder a man tries to win her back directly, the more likely he is to push her away. I've watched this dynamic repeat itself in countless therapy sessions. Different men, different relationships. Same emotional outcome. Most of the men I've worked with believed the relationship ended because they didn't say the right thing, didn't fight hard enough, or didn't show enough effort. What they eventually realized, often painfully, is that attraction does not respond to pressure. Attraction responds to emotional safety, to self-respect, and to change that is felt, not announced. When a woman says she's no longer interested, most men hear rejection. What's often really happening is emotional exhaustion. She has already processed the relationship internally while he is just beginning to panic. That timing gap creates desperation on one side and resistance on the other. And desperation, no matter how sincere, is never attractive. I've seen men talk themselves out of a second chance by over-explaining, apologizing repeatedly, or trying to negotiate love as if it were a contract. I've also seen men do something very different. They stopped trying to control the outcome. They turned inward. They regulated their emotions. They rebuilt their sense of self. And interestingly, those were the moments when reconnection sometimes became possible. This conversation isn't about tricks. It's not about manipulation. And it's not about forcing interest where it no longer exists. It's about understanding how attraction actually works, why it fades, and what gives you the only real chance of reconnection without losing your dignity. Stay with me. 1. Why chasing her pushes. Her further away from a man's perspective, chasing feels logical. If you care, you show it. If something is slipping away, you reach for it. Emotionally, that instinct makes sense. But emotionally driven behavior is not the same as emotionally effective behavior. In therapy, the moment a man begins chasing is usually the moment he becomes emotionally ungrounded. His attention shifts from connection to control. He stops responding to the relationship as it is and starts reacting to the fear of losing it. That fear leaks into everything. Messages get longer, explanations get heavier, apologies pile up, urgency becomes louder. What he believes is commitment, she experiences as pressure. Pressure doesn't feel like love. It feels like obligation. And when someone feels emotionally cornered, their nervous system doesn't move toward closeness. It moves toward distance. Many women pull away, not because they don't care, but because they feel responsible for regulating someone else's emotional state. Attraction rarely survives that dynamic. What chasing communicates, even when unintended, is, I need you to be okay so I can be okay. That's an exhausting role to carry. Healthy attraction requires choice, not persuasion. The more a man chases, the more emotional power he hands over. The dynamic becomes uneven, and attraction cannot thrive where balance is lost. I once worked with a man who said, with complete sincerity, if I can just explain myself better, she'll understand and come back. What he didn't realize was that understanding wasn't the issue. She understood him perfectly. What she no longer felt was polarity, mystery, emotional independence. His constant pursuit flattened the dynamic into reassurance seeking instead of connection. Chasing also traps a man in the past version of the relationship. He tries to revive what was instead of addressing what has changed. Relationships don't restart by replaying old patterns louder. They change when someone changes internally. When a man stops chasing, something subtle but powerful happens. His nervous system calms. He regains self-control. He stops leaking emotional energy. And leaked energy kills mystery. If reconnection is possible, it almost always begins here. 2. What not interested really means emotionally. When a woman says she's not interested anymore, most men hear finality, a verdict, a door slammed shut. From a therapeutic lens, that interpretation is understandable, but incomplete. In reality, those words usually describe an internal emotional state, not a punishment. In most cases, she didn't wake up one day and decide she was done. She disengaged slowly, quietly, internally. She processed while still present. She considered while still trying. By the time she says it out loud, she's already tired. Emotional fatigue changes attraction. Not interested rarely means there is zero attraction left. It usually means attraction no longer feels safe, light, or rewarding. Attraction fades when a relationship becomes emotionally heavy, when it revolves around tension, reassurance, conflict, or unspoken resentment. Men often believe effort alone sustains attraction. It doesn't. You can be loyal, consistent, and well-intentioned, and still lose emotional traction if the dynamic becomes unbalanced. When a man starts relying on the relationship to regulate his emotions, she often senses it long before he does. That silent responsibility erodes desire. Sometimes, not interested is a boundary, not a rejection. It's her saying, I don't have the capacity to keep trying in this emotional state. And feelings don't respond to logic. They respond to experience over time. When men stop hearing those words as rejection and start hearing them as information, everything shifts. They fix everything. Trap. When men try to fix everything, they believe they're being responsible. They reflect. They apologize. They promise change. They explain intentions. But emotionally, they're responding to fear. Fear-driven repair feels overwhelming to the other person. I've watched men exhaust themselves trying to become perfect overnight. They become hyper-attentive, overly agreeable, constantly available. They call it effort. She feels inconsistency, not because the changes aren't real, but because they're fueled by anxiety, not grounded growth. You cannot repair emotional disconnection with explanations. Connection returns through experience, through how it feels to be around you now. Men also want resolution quickly, certainty, reassurance. But emotional healing doesn't follow timelines. Constant check-ins reopen wounds instead of letting them settle. Real growth happens when a man stops performing improvement and starts living it quietly. 4. How emotional pressure kills attraction. Emotional pressure is rarely loud. Often it's subtle, constant seriousness, every interaction carrying weight. What are we? Where do I stand? Are we okay? Even when unsaid, she feels the request. Attraction needs emotional freedom. Pressure replaces freedom with responsibility. Playfulness disappears. Lightness fades. Connection becomes work. When a man regulates himself instead of the relationship, pressure lifts, and only then does attraction have room to breathe. Stepping back without disappearing. Stepping back isn't withdrawal, it isn't punishment, and it isn't a tactic, it's balance. When one person leans in while the other pulls away, distance grows. Healthy space interrupts that cycle. Stepping back means no over-monitoring, no reassurance seeking, no emotional chasing, presence without pressure. Men who do this don't vanish. They simply stop using the relationship to stabilize their anxiety. That shift is felt immediately. 6. Rebuilding self-respect. First attraction. Rarely survives quiet self-abandonment. When a man sacrifices boundaries, values, or direction to keep a relationship, he loses the grounded presence that created attraction in the first place. Self-respect is not dominance. It's internal alignment. When a man respects his time, emotions, and direction, he becomes steady. And steadiness creates safety. Safety allows attraction to return naturally, if it's going to return at all. 7. when letting go creates the only real chance. Letting go doesn't mean giving up. It means releasing the need to control the outcome. When a man stops needing the relationship to reassure him, his presence changes. He listens without defending, speaks without demanding agreement, exists without fear. Ironically, this is often when attraction returns, not because he stopped caring, but because his care became grounded. Letting go restores dignity, and dignity is always attractive. Getting a woman back is not about chasing, it's not about convincing, and it's not about control. It's about understanding emotional dynamics, respecting boundaries, and reclaiming yourself. Whether reconnection happens or not, this path ensures you remain grounded, whole, and capable of healthy connection. And that, regardless of outcome, is the real win. If this message resonated with you, do well to subscribe and anticipate my next video. These conversations go deeper, and what's coming next may change how you see relationships entirely. Until then, stay grounded, stay disciplined, and take care of yourself.